Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Training Talk here on Personal Defense Network, the Personal Defense Network. And this is the show where we talk about you, about your life, and how to protect it. In the next hour, we're going to explore how you can train and prepare yourself to face your own worst case scenario and keep you and your family safe from harm. Now, we don't talk about religion or politics on this show, and you're not going to hear crazy conspiracy theories or fringe commentary, none of that kind of stuff. Just reliable information that you can use, that you can put to use right away in your life to keep yourself safe. Now, I'd really appreciate it if you'd share this show with your friends and your family and your co-workers and your neighbors and all of those people. Spread the word. Let them know that this show is out there, that it exists, that we talk about this kind of stuff in a mature and adult way. And I'm sure that I'd appreciate it. I can tell you that much. And I'm sure that they'll appreciate it too. So welcome, everybody. If you're new to the show, thank you for stopping by and seeing what we're all about. And if you're a returning viewer, hey, thanks for taking more time out of your busy life. I know everybody's life is busy right now to be with us tonight. So tonight, my special guest expert is Cecil Birch of Immediate Action Combatives. Now, Cecil hates it when I talk about him. He really does. But the man, let's face it, the man's a legend. All right. That's just all there is to it. Cecil, welcome.
Oh man.
Yeah, you got to live up to that now.
That's not going to happen. There's no way that's going to happen.
So for those who don't know, Cecil's been on the show before. Cecil is an expert in all things martial arts, and particularly in the world of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But he's more than conversant with all the martial arts, and more importantly, and the reason we like to talk to him is because of his knowledge of the intersection of martial arts and defensive shooting. And he's got experience in both worlds, and so he's like the subject matter expert that I go to when I need answers. So thanks for being on the show again tonight.
You bet. Thanks for asking me. It's always fun to be on the show.
It's always great to have you. And I'm going to start off before we get into our topic tonight, because we've got a lot to talk about. But I want to talk just a few minutes. Cecil and I, before the show started, we were talking about how a lot of gun people see the gun as the answer to everything all the time, and we both know that's not true. And this kind of came up again this week. You may be aware that there was an attack, a terrorist attack in New York City on Halloween this week, just a couple of days ago as we're recording this, and killed 8 people, I believe, injured a dozen more. And on social media and on the forums and everything else, of course, the first thing that people come out with is, oh gosh, it's really too bad that somebody wasn't carrying a gun in that particular case. And it kind of stops there, because the question becomes, well, what do you do with a gun against a truck? And a lot of people, well, I'll just shoot the driver. Well, the trouble is, yeah, you might be able to, but can you do that against a moving target? And particularly when you've got angled windshield glass between you and the subject, and he's moving at angles and you're probably moving and all that kind of stuff. And even if you do manage to hit him, now you simply have an unguided missile instead of a somewhat guided missile. It really doesn't gain you anything. So the idea that the gun is always the answer to all self-defense problems just isn't very realistic. But the question comes, well, how do we defend ourselves against a vehicle attack? And this is a legitimate question, because as a lot of law enforcement people will tell you, this is now on everybody's radar, because some of the terrorist organizations in the world have exhorted their followers to use vehicles in attacks just like this. And of course, we saw it in London just a month or so ago. It happens, and there's a reasonable belief that it might happen more frequently. So everybody's on edge. What do we do about this? How do we handle this? Well, the first thing is, get your head out of your phone. I think that's probably the first recommendation, because a lot of this depends upon the people on the street being engrossed in their own little world, paying attention to their own distractions instead of paying attention to their environment. So what should you pay attention to? Well, when you were walking on a city street, now, folks, admittedly, I don't walk on city streets very much because I live out in the country. I've lived out in the country most of my life, and so I don't spend a lot of time in like really urban areas, but I've been in them enough, including in New York City, to understand that people kind of get used to the traffic, cars going by, cars honking, depending upon where you are, people yelling at each other, all this kind of stuff happens. And we kind of tune it out because that's what we do as human beings to deal with an environment that's very chaotic and very confusing and a lot of inputs. What you need to do if you're on the street is to pay a little bit of attention to the flow of traffic. What's happening? Do you hear a car revving up? Maybe you should look around and see where that is. Did everybody start honking or stop honking at the same time? Do you notice a vehicle swerving erratically in and out of traffic? Maybe you can spot it actually heading for a sidewalk. All of these things that you can observe using your sight and your hearing if your head isn't buried in your phone. So manage your distractions when you're in public is the lesson here. Second thing, if you have a choice and you're walking on a city street, remember that these attacks succeed because vehicles are able to get up onto the sidewalks where the pedestrians are. It doesn't make any sense to try this in the middle of the road because there aren't a lot of pedestrians there. So the idea is to get the vehicle onto the sidewalk where they can travel through the pedestrians. If you have a choice, walk on the side of the street where there's a lot of parked cars to shield you from something that might try to get up on the curb. If there are a lot of parked cars there, an encroaching vehicle, an attacking vehicle, can't get onto the sidewalk where they need to be. So on some one-way streets, for instance, there will be one side of the street where you can park and one side of the street where you can't park. And perhaps if you have a choice and it fits within what you need to do, choose the side of the street where all the cars are parked rather than the side of the street that's open. Finally, if you notice a car coming up onto the sidewalk where the pedestrians are, what you need to do is move at right angles to the direction of that vehicle's movement, at right angles. Of course, that might take you out into the street. If there's a vehicle barreling down the sidewalk, out in the street may in fact be the safer place. But right angles, so one way or the other. Now, the one thing that you don't want to do is allow yourself to be caught up against a building where you can be crushed by the vehicle. If you head toward the building, head towards a door, preferably a door with like a little alcove. You know how a lot of, particularly in the older section of town, a lot of the buildings will have a little alcove where the actual door to the shop or the restaurant is. Get into that. Get through the door. Open the door, get through the door if you possibly can. If you can't, at least get into an alcove so that a sideswiping vehicle can't easily get to you. If the door is open, if the business is open or the office is open, whatever it is, go through the door and go through the business and head out the back way. Why do you want to do this? Well, as we saw in the London attack, there are sometimes secondary aspects to the attack. In some cases, the attackers have gotten out and used knives, or in some cases, firearms, to attack more people. You want to be away from that. So through a door, get through the business and out the back way as quickly as you can. And those are the realistic things that you can do. Of course, in the case if you're in a situation where there are a lot of casualties, and we've been harping on this now for a couple of months with Caleb Causey on the show, you really should be carrying trauma care equipment with you wherever you go. Whether you've got it maybe in a messenger bag on your person or in an ankle kit like the Safer Faster responder, whatever it is, carry trauma equipment with you. As we, particularly when we saw in the Las Vegas shooting attack here last month, the presence of trauma care equipment and the knowledge to use it is really important to save lives in a mass casualty incident. So learn how to deal with trauma, learn how to treat it, carry the equipment you need to treat it, even if you're not injured, somebody else may be. And that's really important in terms of saving people from any sort of attack or accident or anything else. Just recently in my little town, we had a situation where a gentleman had an accident with a tractor, and I won't go into the gory details, but he bled to death because of some amputation that happened. And had perhaps somebody been there with trauma care equipment right away, rather than having to wait for EMTs, perhaps he could have been saved. So these things happen all the time, and not just because of terrorist attacks. They happen because of accidents too. So learn how to use trauma equipment, carry the equipment with you, and learn how to treat people. So that's sort of the Cliff's Notes version of dealing with vehicular attacks in the modern age. And as I said, we may be seeing more of these because the law enforcement, as I said, tells us that these are part of the playbook now. Cecil, have you got anything to add to that? Anything I really screwed up on? Or
no, that was good. The only thing I'll add is, you and I are a little bit more on the seasoned side. We've been around a little bit, and and I think a lot of people, especially on social media, who start commenting on these stories, they're pretty, young, probably, 20s, 30s, right? And and they probably haven't lived a lot that as long and seen as much. I remember this was a fairly common thing in the Mideast in the early and mid 80s, right? With the peacekeepers in Lebanon and a number of situations like that. And the same type thing happened. And you had these trucks laden with explosives barreling in to Marine barracks and embassies and stuff. And what was interesting was you had trained soldiers with ARs, with M6, M4s, M16, and they were unable to stop. With rifle fire, aimed automatic rifle fire, they were unable to stop these vehicles. So to the point where they put up, the giant concrete pillars and all that kind of stuff. So when I heard somebody saying, "Oh, if I had my Glock 43, it's just like, guys, we've seen this. This stuff is it's not that new. And certain things work, certain things don't. Like you said, pay attention and get out of there. I think your point about if you do shoot the driver, now you've got an unaimed missile. Then, cars don't suddenly stop because you take your foot off the accelerator.
But they do in the movies.
Of course, they do in the movies, of course. Or they slow really quickly and in the middle of the street where there's nobody, so the hero can look like the hero. But I don't know. It's just funny, the armchair quarterbacking. It's like, I think it's a good idea to armchair quarterback, but it has to be realistic. It has to be under, what most people are realistically going to be able to do, not what we fantasize we're going to do because we're face shooting ninjas or whatever.
It's funny because as you're saying that, I sort of reflected back on a situation that happened in a town near us several months ago, where a lady was killed by a vehicle that was speeding down a parking lot, hit several cars and hit her and hit another person, I think, at the same time. And in that particular case, it was an elderly gentleman who had a medical issue. So what if this car barreling down the sidewalk isn't a terrorist, but it's a guy with who needs insulin, yeah. Right? And you're going to open fire on him. So you have to sort of keep that in the back of your mind as well. That sometimes we don't always know why things happen. So good point. Thank you for bringing that up. So the reason I wanted you on the show tonight is because you have an interesting class that I wanted to talk about, and I noticed this. I think it was on the oh gosh, the training tour this year. I think it was. Not absolutely sure about that. Um, but you have a course on basically close quarter, dealing with the problems of close quarter engagement and shooting. And
Mm.
what is the name of that class, and what exactly does it entail?
So it's called close contact handgun, and it's actually, there's 3 levels to it. We did it for 2 reasons. Number one, because a lot of people can't commit a lot of times to a full weekend class. That's hard on some people. So we have it as about 3.5 hours on a Friday night, and then we're about 9 hours on the range on Saturday, but then we're done. So we've got 3 different levels, but so it was partly time, but also here's the background. So I've, as you said, I've been dealing with this idea of martial arts integrated with firearms for a very long time, and how they work together and the best ways to do it. I've been working together with a few people like Craig Douglas and Chris Fry and Paul Sharp, stuff like that. Guys, we've been dealing with this. So I've been hosting Craig out here in Phoenix since 2007, maybe. Yeah, probably. And at least every year, maybe a couple times we've managed to do it twice a year. We do a class up in northern Arizona in here. And, we always did well, plenty of students, but I always thought, man, this is such an important course to me. I think it's as important as they come. And I think, it should sell out right away. But it's always, sometimes you have to kind of convince people to come. And so I have the same problem in my coursework, right? I was just in, where was I last? Dallas. I was in Dallas a few weeks ago. And I don't know, 12, 13 people. So it's good. But I think there's a lot more people who could use it. And I think what it is they see videos of, of some of the training drills with guys, on top of each other, punching, trying to stab you, trying to get a gun out and shoot each other, and maybe top of one guy. And I think a lot of people look at that and go, oh, yeah, maybe that's a really necessary course, but, I'm not in shape. I've got injuries. I'm too old, or all this stuff. And well, and I think, and I understand that for sure, but, neither myself or Craig or Paul, none of us teach Fight Club, right? None of us is, you're going to get in there, I don't care what you're doing, and we're going to destroy you, and we're going to make your life a living hell. No, the point, the goal is to get you better, right? The goal is to teach you something, and so you walk away with some better skills, or at least an understanding of how to get better at the skills, and why they're important, why we need to integrate empty hands with guns and that kind of stuff. And so the idea that you have to be like, a 25-year-old roided up, athlete in your prime, and that's the only people who could do the coursework, is wrong. And I try to say it online, I try to, social media, and try to, no, it's not that. And Craig tries to do it, and we all try to do it. But again, I think people then think we're just selling it. We just want money. We just want, students to come in, and we're just going to lie, and then we're going to kill them when they show up. So yeah, that's the only thing I can think of, right? Because then you get people going, well, let me get in shape first, or let me do like 6 months of jujitsu. No, that's not the point. The point is, the coursework is, you don't have to have any background. We're trying to get, whatever your level is, we're trying to make you better at it. And so it was kind of a frustrating thing. And I was working with another local guy, Glenn Stilson. He runs a company called Independence Training, is another firearms instructor here in town. And he's trained with Craig, and he's helped me host Craig the last few years. And Glenn and I were like, well, what if we did a course where it was very ECQC like, but without any of the entanglement, without any of the actual physical part. So that was the genesis of it. And so the first level of the class, the first level of close contact handgun, is just that. right? And then the second, third level is we introduce the entanglement, right? The second level is standing entanglement. Third level will be the ground entanglement. But the idea is in the first one, what we're looking at is shooting from attention, shooting from a high compress ready, shooting along an appropriate line of compression or extension based on proximity to the threat, and then how to keep the fight from going to an entanglement, using verbalization, using movement, footwork, how all this stuff works together so that this guy, even if he starts at 5-7 yards and is coming towards you, you don't let him get close enough where he can just reach out and grab you. And so we get all of that necessary, that important pre-fight stuff, right? That, you know, theoretically outside of medical and fitness might be the most important part of self-defense, right? I know you talk a lot about that in your book, the most recent book. You know, a lot of this, yeah, it's fun to do all the other stuff, but hey, if we can figure out how not to even get there, cool, then let's just shoot on the range for fun and never have to actually use it.
You know,
so
it's the old,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's the old line, you know, that you win 100% of the fights that you don't have to be in, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And if we can get that idea across, and I think a lot of people who go through ECQC will say that's some of the most important takeaways. But then that's not what everybody sees, right? They see the people fighting, and then they go, oh, Cecil's doing the same thing, Paul's doing the same thing, and we're just fighting. No, that's when everything screws up, right? So like my normal coursework, everything starts with the idea of worst case scenario. So yeah, we're going physical from the first minute of Saturday morning on my coursework, but that's because we've screwed up everything else. We've made all these other mistakes. And now what happens when we've screwed up? When we weren't situationally aware, when we did, you know, get ambushed, when that assault happened, when we weren't prepared. But that's not the goal. The goal is to never get there. So we need all the pre-fight stuff. And so it's sort of like a multi thing. So if we can get this, what I think some of the most important stuff out there to people, but at the same time, get them into they see, you know what? Yeah, I don't really want to do the fighting part, but I can see how important you might need it. And, oh, you know what? These instructors are not madmen. They're not psychos. They're not bloodthirsty beasts. They're actually kind of cool, and they're actually helping us. So then maybe you get people doing the coursework, and then they go, oh, you know what? I'll do the next level. I'll do the entangled coursework, or I'll do ECQC, or I'll do any of the other guys like Greg Elfritz or Rob Pincus or any of the guys who do that kind of coursework, and it's not as intimidating. So that was sort of the genesis of it. And so that we'll be running our fourth iteration of the class, I think, is coming up in a couple of weeks.
This is cool. I wish you were in Oregon, quite frankly, because I'd like to take this class. It's been years since I've done anything. Now, oh boy, it's probably been a decade. And I could use, you know, a lot of refresher, and there are probably a lot of things that have been developed and that we recognize now that we didn't a decade ago, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, for sure.
You know, because there was a point at time when the sort of the doctrine, and I should back up and sort of preface this by saying, those of us that teach defensive shooting, there's the huge vast majority of defensive shooting happen sort of beyond 2 arms reach out to about, you know, about 5-7 yards, something like that. Right.
Yeah.
And then there's a small percentage that happen greater than that, you know, out to, you know, maybe 25 yards. But then there's that percentage that happens where you're talking about, like riding close. So those of us that teach defensive shooting, it's no problem for us to teach that stuff beyond sort of 2 arms length out to whatever distance that is. We do that all the time. That's easy. But the stuff as we get in closer is more and more specialized. And sometimes when those who don't understand the nuances and the issues that happen in there start to teach this stuff, it kind of goes off the rails and you end up with a lot of really kind of strange stuff being taught. And that's kind of where we were like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And so the idea was we were teaching things like, oh, how to get to the gun right away, rather than maybe you've got a different problem than getting to the gun. Right.
Yeah.
So I would love to take this course. It sounds like you've structured it really, really well to get people in.
We put a lot of work into it. Before we did the first one, it was about, I don't know, about a year of brainstorming and seeing, well, let's do this, and kind of beta testing with a couple of my local students, just to kind of get a vague idea of what's the best way to get this idea across. Because, you know, one of the drills that we do, one of the very first drills we do is, so the good guy's got a blue gun. And then all we have you do is, I want you to draw the gun and do what you would do against a bad guy. Meanwhile, the bad guy, he's not moving fast. His job is just to encroach. And every single time, everybody goes, when I ask afterwards, how'd it go? Everyone's like, I got my gun grabbed every time. I got wrapped up every time. I'm like, yeah, because, you know, we say it's like situational awareness, right? Everybody goes, okay, be situationally aware. Okay, great, got it. You know, that doesn't mean anything. Just because you know something theoretically doesn't mean you've practiced it, you've trained it, you've ingrained it. It's the same with this idea of distance, right? This idea of, oh, I know I can get my gun out and extend and get all the way out. But yeah, but the other guy can do the same thing with his hands. Wow. And all of a sudden, you think you're starting at 5 yards, right? Because it's, you know, people 5 yards, that's easy. But all of a sudden, that guy takes 2 steps and his arms are stretched out because he's not T-Rexed, right? He's stretched out, and all of a sudden he's got your gun because you're feeding it to him. You're going towards him with it. And everyone goes, oh, I never thought about that. But yet, people are going to assume, right, that they are prepared to deal with that kind of situation on the street all the time, right? The reason a lot of fights will go to an entanglement is because it's so easy to do. It takes no time. So here's how I put it to people. So actually, you're a good person to ask. So what would you say, Grant, is a good time drawing your gun from concealment and getting around on target? Average guy starting cold, what would you go, you know, that's good, that's reasonable? Average guy is probably going to take, you know, around 2 seconds. An average decent shooter, a guy who's practiced a little bit. Practice a little bit, or, you know, perhaps slightly less than 2 seconds. Yeah, that's my cold one. If I'm kind of not doing that great, it's about 1.7 to 1.5, right? And I think that's, you know, for an okay person, I think that's reasonable. So let me ask you this: how fast can you close 5 yards from a standing start? Oh, much faster than that. Exactly. Nobody ever thinks about that. Okay, great. I got my blind, man. I got a 1.3 second draw, but that guy's at 5 yards. It takes them, the average person, with even a guy with a limp, a guy who's starting from a stop, he can close 5 yards in a second. Yeah. So the math is not matching up if all you're going to do is stand and deliver against that. But we always think, the faster I get my gun out, right? Fast. I'm so fast. So you're not going to beat that guy. And we're not talking about the guy who's going to assault you he's probably not limping, right? He's probably not on one leg. He's probably in his 20s or 30s, probably been in prison a few times, probably has encountered physical violence multiple times in his life, and is probably used to closing distance pretty quick. And so if you don't practice that, if you never do it, you're not going to pull it off. It's not suddenly going to come to you in the heat of the moment. And let's face it, at this point in time, because we're talking about it doesn't matter whether they're talking social or asocial violence here, they're generally going to be a lot closer than 5 yards. Yep.
And so, if you're, 10 feet away, it's like, somebody with, longer legs than me can close out in, a step and a half.
Exactly.
And it takes no time.
And if the criminal has already decided to target you, and that pre-interview process is already going on, he's not standing still. He's probably already in motion, whether he's kind of circling around you or going straight at you. He's already got the the head start on the movement.
Yeah, and having been in that position a couple of times, being interviewed by a criminal, they have that tendency. They don't stand there. They have that. They're kind of moving a little bit back and forth a little bit, and kind of, they're moving, and they can get started toward me much faster than I can do anything with my gun.
Yeah. And it's magnified if you've never done it, if you've never practiced it, if everything is square, flat range, and all you focus on is getting that gun out, and don't get me wrong, that's an important skill. I'm not saying that's a waste of time. There's a time and a place when that might be the best skill you need to save your life, but it's not in every situation. And especially, it's not necessarily a good one in the typical civilian interpersonal violence thing, right? I mean, that carjacker is not standing at 50 yards waving a knife at you, go get out of your car, right? That doesn't happen.
It's funny. You said something earlier when we were talking about the truck attack that I think is really appropriate and important here as well. We said earlier, just because you shoot the driver doesn't mean the truck stops. And in this particular case, the guy's 10 feet away from you. He's got a weapon. Just because you shoot him doesn't mean that he doesn't shoot or stab you, and you end up with non-survivable wounds. The idea that you have such mad skills that you can get your gun out so fast, and you've got these wonderful split times, that doesn't mean the bad guy's going to stop, does it?
No, I mean, how is there any reasonably respected firearms trainer on the planet that will tell you that, one or two good rounds of 9mm, gold dot is guaranteed to stop a guy? No, every single one says what? The exact opposite, right? Exactly. Probably not going to stop him. But yet somehow in this, this bad breath distance thing, all I need is one or two rounds, and he's going to stop his actions, and he's going to no longer harm me with his gun, knife, screwdriver, socket wrench, whatever he happens to have.
Right.
I don't know. There's something that happens to people when we start talking about that, that entangled fighting thing. And I think it's because people are afraid of it. So they're trying to come up with some justification. I don't need that. I'll speed rock the gun, 2 rounds, center mass with 45 hardball, boom, got it.
But there are a lot of people. There's still a lot of people, because I run into them occasionally, out there who really believe that works.
Oh, sure. But of course, the Flat Earth Society still has members too. So.
Good point.
Hopefully, but I mean, that's the thing. Like doing a show like yours, the way you approach it is you're not making fun of anybody. We're not talking down anybody. We're just saying, here's facts, here's information. Think about this kind of stuff. You don't have to agree with me, but if you're going to disagree, come up with an intellectual response. Not what you feel, not what you think, not what happened 50 years ago, but, come up with some way to dispute what we've just been talking about.
It's funny. You were talking earlier about the students who end up getting their gun taken. And I was laughing because I've seen that happen with relatively raw recruits at our state's police academy here. And I know some great people who work down there, and friends of Craig's and Paul's and that kind of thing. Yep. And so I've gotten a chance.
Very close friend of mine was running the program.
Yeah, that who he is. Yep. And so because I know him and know those guys there, I got a chance to sit in on some of their training sessions. And the same thing happened, with these guys. And sometimes it would happen multiple times, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that there is, we go back to this. This is like a theme tonight. We go back to this idea that if you're gun centric, you're going to attribute to that firearm more capability, more effectiveness, and more utility than it actually has, right?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
The one of the things that I noticed that at least in some of the things that I've done is that people, even once they get entangled, their first sort of reaction is to try to get to their gun. So, now I'm in contact with somebody, I'm hands-on, we're entangled. And the first thing that a lot of people try to do is to try to get their gun out.
Yep.
Why is that a bad idea?
It's because, it's great against a cardboard target. It's great against a training partner who's not actually trying to do anything to you. It's not so good the split second that it's a non-compliant resisting opponent who is not just resisting, but he actively wants you to lose, right? So we have this instinctive thing of trying to hold on to other people. So let's say it's not even a trained bad guy, because that's the thing I always get. Oh yeah, Cecil, but we're not trained to deal with MMA fighters or jiu-jitsu guys. Well, good luck. Hopefully that you don't fight that guy, with that attitude. But even the non-trained guy is going to have certain reactions. You see it all the time in videos of street fights between untrained guys. There's that flailing, grabbing onto the shirts, holding on to each other. So you're already in that entanglement. You may be striking, and now you're going to take your hands away. The one thing keeping you in the fight, the one thing preventing you from getting knocked out, the one thing preventing you from being controlled by him, you're going to take that completely away to go for this weapon. And again, we've already talked about a second and a half, 2 seconds to get the gun on. And then you need X amount of time to put enough rounds on target that you're going to do damage. And that's with assuming you can even get the gun aligned on a good target, as opposed to, now the gun's over here because he's got a hold of your hand. He's got a hold of your hand, and now your gun's pointing out, boom, 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 boom. That's not going to do any good. So, the fight, and some people say this, the root word of gunfight is fight. Yeah, it's a cliche, but it's actually true. It's not the gun, it's the answer. It's we have to make sure we keep this guy from controlling us. Number one. That is the single most important thing. And then everything else, whether you shoot him, you stab him, you choke him, you punch him, you hold him for cops to come, you push him down and run away, whatever that is, it only stems from you being in control of him and him not being in control of you. Well, we're all humans. We only got, X amount of limbs. So the main way I'm going to keep that guy from controlling me is my arms. So if they're occupied down here, they're not doing what I need them to do. But it's instinctive. Like you said, it's the gun. The gun is the magic talisman. The gun is my rabbit's foot. All I have to do is produce it. And it is it is the Ark of the Covenant. Everybody, is smashed from it. I don't have to worry about all the other stuff because that just automatically happens. But as soon as you start, that's how I know when people have done legitimate force-on-force training. When they talk about, you just get the gun out, the I just, right? William April says, if you talk to anybody and they start any sentence with I just, you get the hell out because they don't know what they're talking about. But it's true. Anybody who's done legitimate force-on-force where the other guy wants you to lose and can do whatever he wants to ensure that happens, you'll find that all these cool techniques that, the easy techniques, the techniques that you're taught in a gun class in 5 minutes, right? We spend 2 days on the range doing a class, and it's shooting at all these different distances. Okay, guys, we got to deal with the close quarters problem. So here's this technique, whatever it is, whether good or bad, but you're teaching it for 5 minutes. You let the guys run it for 5 minutes. Great. Now you guys are all masters of close quarters shooting. We wouldn't treat any other type of shooting with that level of dismissiveness. Why are we going to do it when I argue that the worst part of a fight is the entangled fight? Because there's so much stuff that can happen, right? If you're in a gunfight, the guy's 10 yards away, right? What do you have to worry about? Him shooting you.
About it.
But in an entanglement, shooting, smashing you, choking you, breaking limbs, gouging your eyes, blah, 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 blah. And everything can change literally with an inch of movement, right? If I'm in entanglement and I move my elbow an inch improperly, that is death. And that's not hyperbole. That is, I will have lost the fight with that little stuff. And there's no way in 10 minutes of practice on a square range are you going to understand those little variables. So if you're going to teach close quarter shooting, I think you have the responsibility of being very serious about it.
This is why I started off saying that those of us that teach defensive shooting, generally teach it from 2 arms length out and not in, because I think those of us that are honest and those of us that at least have had some background understand that this is a completely different problem. It is sort of, that 2 arms out thing is all about the gun. It's all about marksmanship. It's all about shooting. It's all, all that stuff. Great. I can teach that. But it's once we get into the point where we're actually touching each other, the problem changes completely. And it's at that point that I recognize that I am not qualified to even begin to teach that. And I'm certainly not going to do my students a disservice by teaching them some silly thing like, oh, just speed rock and, double tap him and, or, do the palm shove back off and draw your gun. And
that's even, to me, that's almost worse than the speed rock.
So for those, and I'm sure there are some people watching who don't get this because they've probably seen it in classes. What typically happens in force on force when somebody attempts to do the palm shove, back off, and draw their gun? What usually happens?
That usually either they completely miss, it slides off, because it's one thing to push off a flat cardboard, a piece of paper on a cardboard backer. You're not going to miss. When you put your palm up there, you're moving that sucker. A guy's head, nice, round, maybe slippery because he's sweaty, maybe he's bald, and now you don't get that perfect one, and that slides past, and he's right there where he was anyway, and now you've signaled to him, oh, the fight's on, right? Where maybe he was still trying to figure out how he was going to launch his attack. You just told him, oh, so all right, I might as well do it now. And now you've exposed yourself, right? Because now your hand's passed, you've not done anything, and he's within that. And now your gun's all the way back here. Or now you compound it, because everybody teaches it. You do that, and then where do they step?
Backwards.
Straight backwards.
Straight back.
You don't want to go to the ground because you think, fighting on the ground is bad in the street. Well, guess what? That's how you get to the ground, is by stepping backwards under threat. Right, I can walk backwards all day long and probably be okay. But now all of a sudden I realize out of nowhere I'm fighting for my life. That first step, boom, I'm gone. I'm on my ground. I'm on the ground. And so all that kind of stuff, and none of those techniques ever take into account what the other guy's doing, right? We have there's this implied assumption that he's just standing there. Hey, I'm going to kill you. He's never reaches out. He's not trying to physically do anything. He's not already rushing in. He's not capable of making that decision to start the fight. It's a bad thing. But, like I'm a decent shooter. I've been shooting for a very, very long, all my life, my college graduation present, I went to Gunsight in 1987 with Jeff Cooper was still there. Louis Auerbach was the head instructor. So I've been doing this a long time, but you will not see Cecil teach, the classic handgun defensive handgun class where we're starting at 5 yards and back. Can I? Yeah, probably. I could be okay. But that's not where I spend 38 years of training. That's not my expertise. Meanwhile, there's plenty of people like you, like Rob, like Mike Pinone, like Craig, like everybody who has been doing that and can teach it far better than me. So why should I? I just wish some of the firearms instructors would treat me with the same with the same level of respect. You know what I mean? And my my expertise, my area of expertise. I wish they would treat that with the same level of respect.
It's funny because as a teacher myself, I look at what you teach, and to me, I don't know a good way to put this. To me, it looks so much more involved, so much more difficult, and so much easier to screw up than what I do. What I do is easy. I mean, this is simple stuff. Holy cow! There are a lot, and it's funny. We were just talking about moving backwards, and every time I've seen somebody do that against in force and force, it's like they just get run over, like the truck over Wile E. Coyote, and that's what happens. And so they're just
every time,
and so there's just a lot of ways to lose at this, and to me, I think it requires a whole lot more knowledge and a whole lot more dedication to teach it than what I teach. So I'm impressed with what you do.
Well, but I mean, we all have our areas. You know what I mean? I'm not going to teach a course on the legal aspects, right? I'm not going to be Caleb. I'm not going to teach you how to apply a tourniquet. Do I know how to apply a tourniquet? Sure. I carry one every day. I know how to do it. I'm not going to teach anybody because that requires, like you said, if you're going to teach something, especially something potentially life-saving, that requires a level of depth and breadth of experience and knowledge that I don't have in that area. So we all have to do our thing, and we don't have to be the jack of all trades, right? Just it doesn't diminish me as a badass, for want of a better word. That's not how I see myself. That was a joke. But it doesn't change my level of area of expertise if I'm not as good a shooter at 10 yards as a lot of other people are. And I don't have to be, I don't have to know how to run a carbine, in a team, CQB, shoot house environment. I don't have to pontificate about that. Right. So I think the community, the training community, would be so much better served if we said, this is what I know. I understand this is good. And there's a reason for all of this stuff. Should you know how to run stub revolvers? I think so. Regular revolvers, I think that's a good skill. Should we run carbines? No, sure. Shotguns, sure. Medical, legal, on and on. There's room for all of it. And we shouldn't all just have to jump in just because, my little, cool guy t-shirt says instructor on it. Like, I know everything. I'm Mr. Combat Guru,
The one thing that and in fact, I wrote it down here. The one thing that really struck me about this conversation, and I've never heard it put this way before. And I like this term. We were talking about practicing force on force, and a lot of people think that because they've gone out and they've used like simunitions or something, and they think they've done force on force. And the way that you put this, against someone who actively wants you to lose.
Yeah.
And I think that that's my eyes kind of went like this because I never thought in that way. That's really where the I hate the cliche, but the rubber hits the road, because if your opponent does not actively want you to lose, you won't get as much value or perhaps any value out of it.
Exactly. That's why when people throw around the term, I've pressure tested it. Oh, really? How? Because you grab your buddy and said, grab my wrist, no, the other wrist. Resisting is not the end all be all. Yeah, that's the first part, but that opponent has to have some reason that you need to lose, whether that's because he cares about you getting better and safer, and he's going to say, hey, if you screw up this technique, you're going to fail at it, which means you need to train more because your life might depend on this. That's the typical special operations type training, right? They're always all those guys always push each other because they know their lives and their partners' lives might come down to that. So they have to make sure that, if I'm your opposing opponent in the shoot house, I'm going to try to kill you, because if I do, that means you need to do more work. And the other part of it, and this is the other part that people forget, is freedom of action. That's the one that everybody messes up, because it's real easy to say, okay, all right, I'm going to do this wrist release technique. All right, so grab my wrist. You're going to try to, you want me to fail, but all you can do is stand there and hold my wrist. Well, you know what? I'm probably going to be able to do my move. But that's not how bad guys are, right? Bad guys don't have one thing, and we don't know what that thing is. They might throw a punch. They might tackle you. They might throw something at you. Their buddy might be off to the side. He comes off from the side. You can't limit what your training partner is doing if you want to truly make sure that this can work. It was a big thing in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s when Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu first hit. And all the traditional martial artists, they just lost their minds because none of them were grapplers. And so here's jiu-jitsu guys taking down and choking out karate guys and kung fu guys and blah, 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 blah. So all the karate guys, all the traditional martial artists, they would do these technique sequences in all the magazines, Black Belt, Inside Kung Fu, all that. And they go, here's how you stop a grappler. But it was always the guy comes at you with this awful schoolyard tackle that has nothing to do with the grappler. And the other part was, you already know that because that's the technique you're going to show. So he's coming at you with that. Well, that's if you tell me, hey Cecil, I'm going to come at you right now and I'm going to throw this big overhand right at your head. Okay, ready? Well, you know what? I'm going to pull off the coolest defense against that move. I'm going to look like I'm Neo in the Matrix, right? Because you're telling me what's coming. I know it is and have time to prepare. That has no bearing on reality whatsoever. No bad guys. I mean, the whole idea of criminal ruse and the kind of the pre-assault indicators we need to look for are because they're hiding their intentions. So you don't know if it's going to be a punch, if it's going to be this. So if your training doesn't reflect that, you're not pressure testing it. That's where techniques, that's why things like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or boxing or Muay Thai, that's why those things work. Because you are fighting against a guy who wants you to lose and can do anything he wants to enable that. And so if you can pull off your stuff in that environment, well, you can pull it off in any environment. It's not just here in this training situation. I can do it all the time. But yeah, that's a big thing of mine. That's a big bugaboo with me, is that leaving the person who wants you to lose and no freedom of action is like, you're not pressure testing, dude.
That's very cool. That's very cool. So that's, like I said, that was cool enough. I had to write it down. Before we wrap up, because we're running out of time. Before we wrap up,
wow, that flew. Holy moly.
Yeah. It's amazing. We could do another 2 hours here. So before we wrap this thing up, I want to take a couple of minutes out here and just tell everybody about premium membership here at Personal Defense Network, because everybody knows the public side of Personal Defense Network, all the great articles and the free videos, all that kind of stuff we've got. But we also have a membership side of Personal Defense Network that's got a lot more stuff. DVD length videos. If you remember DVDs, nobody remembers them anymore because everybody streams these days. But yeah, if you remember DVDs, we got DVD length videos. We've got DVD length videos of Cecil on the membership side of Personal Defense Network. I've seen them. They are awesome. In fact, I've watched them many times. But that's what we've got on the membership side of Personal Defense Network. Full length videos, video collections. We've got class courses, online courses, all kinds of stuff. And so you're probably wondering, well, how do I get all this wonderfulness? How do I become a premium member at Personal Defense Network? Well, it's pretty easy. There are links all over the site to sign up for premium membership. If you're watching the show on the Personal Defense Network website, and I hope you are, I put a link in there already for you. You can click on and sign up for premium membership. It's $39.95 a year, but such a deal I have for you. Such a deal. If you when you get to checkout, right, you put in your name, your address, credit card number, all that stuff. And there's a little box down there that says coupon code or discount code or something like that. You'll recognize it when you see it. Just do this. Put in this code, Grant10, GRANT, the number 1, the number 0, all one word, Grant10. Put that in the box, and you'll get your first year of premium membership at Personal Defense Network for only $10.
Whoa.
It's a deal. And this is not like limited membership or time membership or anything like that. It's your first full year as a Personal Defense Network member for only $10. So use this code, share it with your friends, Grant10, GRANT, the number 1, the number 0. Sign up for a premium membership at Personal Defense Network. Tell your friends about it, and you too can watch all of Cecil's great videos that are on there. And if you're not watching Cecil's videos, if you're a premium member and you are not watching Cecil's videos, you are wrong. All right. I just want to say that. So Cecil, tell people how they can get in touch with you, what your teaching schedule is, and all that kind of thing.
You can go to my website, iacombatives.com, and I actually just put my 2018 schedule up. With pretty much most of everything is on there. You can go there. You can also email me through it, Cecil@iacombatives.com, if you have questions or comments or anything like that. I love talking about this kind of stuff. Email or whatever, it's always fun for me to talk to like-minded people about these kind of things. So get a hold of me there, or I'm on Facebook on Immediate Action Combatives is the business page, and I try to put videos up and clips and info up as often as I can, and or my YouTube channel, Immediate Action Combatives, because I'm so clever with all these names. Same thing. I'm a little behind on putting videos up on that because I don't like putting content up just for content's sake. I try to put up stuff when I think I have something to say. So, I'm a little behind on doing that, but anybody wants to check out any of that stuff and then contact me afterwards, that's cool. Or check out my schedule where I'm going to be. I'm in Denver 1st of January, Hannibal, Missouri, mid-January, then Calgary in February, which I have no idea how I got talked into going to Calgary in mid-February. The host already said he's going to have armed guards at the gate, so I can't turn around as soon as I come off the plane. They're going to force me to stay for the weekend. But you can check out my schedule. I'd love to see any PDN people, any of the audience people come to the class. It'd be great. And
it's worth noting that Cecil gets all over the country. I mean, he just gets he gets around.
I do.
Yeah, which is very cool. So, thank you so much for being on the show. As always, it's a wonderful time, and I hope everybody checks out. And I've got a link to Cecil's website on the show page here at Personal Defense Network. So, if you're watching this on YouTube, go to Personal Defense Network, and there's a link to his site if you can't remember it. You can always get it there. So be sure to check that out. Also, I'm going to do a quick self-aggrandizement thing. You can always find me, of course, at www.grantcunningham.com. I always like Cecil. I like getting emails, grant@grantcunningham.com. Please send me the emails. I enjoy those, and I answer them as quickly as I can. Sometimes it takes me a few days, but I try to get those as quickly as I can. And be sure and check out my new book, Prepping for Life, The Balanced Approach to Personal Security and Family Safety. And that is available on Amazon.com in both Kindle and paperback formats. This is not a fake book, people. This is a real copy. All right. So you can get that on Amazon.com. You can get it in the iBooks bookstore if you prefer the iBooks format. And if you know someone who has a bookstore, they can order it through Ingram Distributors. If they own a bookstore, they know who Ingram is. You can get it from Ingram Distributors and have them put it on the shelf, so more people can get this.
That's an excellent book, by the way, Grant. That was an excellent book.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Our next show is 2 weeks from tonight, the 16th of November, just a little bit before Thanksgiving. So be sure and check that out. Same time, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. That'll be the third Thursday of the month, as we are always the first and third Thursdays. So check that out. Check Cecil's site out. Check out premium membership here at Personal Defense Network. And we hope to see you again on the 16th. And until then, stay safe, everybody. Bye-bye.